I had a great week last week. Last summer, I took my oldest son on a trip that was meant to be a one-time trip, just the chance for him and I to spend some time together as he was heading into middle school. And we had such a great time together that I decided, hey, we need to do this again. And so that's exactly what we did this past week, and we stayed in St. Paul, Minnesota, and we went over to a Twins game on Thursday afternoon. Well, attempted to see a Twins game. We sat through 3.5 hours of a rain delay and watched nothing happen except rainfall for 3.5 hours, and then we decided we would go back because that night we were seeing the Killers, who I've wanted to see for 20 years, and I was super excited about the show, and he was a great sport, and he went to the show with me, and it was just a great time that we were spending together. And the show was in St. Paul, so we decided the hotel we would get should be in St. Paul, which meant to get to the Twins game, we had a couple different options. We could either drive over and pay for parking, or we could get an Uber, but apparently there's a shortage of Uber drivers over in the Twin Cities because it was like $80 to get an Uber, and I'm not talking a limousine. I'm talking like a 2019 Honda Accord, and I get it. I drive a 2010 Honda Civic, so no judgment here, but I'm not paying $80 to ride in the back of a 2019 Accord. And then the other option was for $6 round trip, we could take the train. And so I decided we would take the train. That was not a good decision. So, what I found out really quickly once we got on the train is there is a very big drug problem in the Twin Cities. Now, some of you I know are thinking, oh, says the 40-something-year-old white guy from Wisconsin. I have been to cities before. I have been to urban centers. I have seen things. It was heartbreaking to see unfold what we saw on the train. There was more than one person who dropped their Narcan and began searching frantically for it because in their mind, and perhaps reality, this was the difference in whether or not they would live to see another day. I watched as a fight broke out between two people. It started over a seat on the train, and someone felt that the other individual looked at them for too long. It escalated to the point that both of these individuals were yelling at one another, saying multiple things that if I uttered even one of them would be canceled for my life, and yet they continued to say these different things to one another in a manner that everyone on the train was able to hear their conversation, which continued to escalate till they were in one another's faces, and each of them informed the other they were carrying, and the outline of the guns that they were carrying were evident on their belts. It is at that point I softly whispered to my son, "Look out the window," because I thought there was a very real possibility we may witness a murder. And if that were the case, I began to think as I looked out the window, would it be Dateline or 48 Hours? I really hope it's not an A&E show. Like, I at least want it to be network if I'm going to be interviewed about a murder. But these were the thoughts that went through my mind as I passed the time. Luckily, no one was shot. Eventually, the stop came for the people, and they continued to yell at one another through the closed door, and then everyone on the train sat silently as a number of stops continued. And then finally, when the second individual who was involved in the altercation walked out of the train and the door shut, there was a collective breath people took. And the train didn't move for a while. And I thought to myself, maybe this is because there's going to be a police presence and somebody's going to be arrested, but of course, that didn't occur. But as we just sat there, I had the opportunity to see this person who was just so full of rage and anger, who just moments before was threatening to kill another. And I immediately flashed back to what we talked about last week and what we're going to talk about this week. How the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, and peace, and how right there in the midst of so much brokenness, there's a complete absence of love and joy and peace. And the searching and the longing for these things, though they are absent, is not absent. And so people turn to different substances, different vices. They try to fill the emptiness in the void as they are searching after something that isn't present in their life. And then, as I was sitting there processing all of these things, I was reminded how often in life and how easy it is for us to look out the window and for us to see the void and the lack in other people's lives, and how difficult it is for us to look in the mirror and to question what is present in my life. Because the things that should be are escaping me on some level. What am I using to mask it? What am I searching after? Are the fruits that we talked about last week and that we'll continue to look at today, are they the markers of my life? Do they define my reality? If you have your phones or your tablets, I'd invite you to follow along with us this morning in the Bible app. It's a free resource that you can find in whatever app store you utilize on your device. And once you have the Bible app installed, there's a feature that we use together each and every week. It's called the Events feature. You can either enable your locations or write in Lakeside, Algoma will pop up, and you can follow along with us that way. If you have a traditional Bible with you this morning, we are again going to be rooted in the book of Galatians, Galatians chapter 5, verses 22 and 23, and we're going to be flipping to some other support passages that you're welcome to flip to, or the verses will be available on the screens to your side. And if you're joining us via the stream this morning, thanks so much for joining us. My name is Brian. I'm part of the team here at Lakeside. The verses will be available for you below as we continue to look at the characteristics of the fruit of the Spirit. Galatians 5:22 and 23 says this, "But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such things there is no law." Last week we talked about love, joy, and peace, and now we arrive at the next fruit of the Spirit, patience. Now, if you've ever been married, if you have kids, or if you have parents, and that is everyone, you know patience can be a real challenge. Patience can be challenging. I looked, and here are some statistics that I found this week from some studies that researchers have done. 96% of Americans consume food or drinks they know are too hot and burn their mouths as opposed to waiting. 96% of people. We're not talking you go to the football game in the fall and it's a cold night and you walk up to the concession stand and you buy that little styrofoam cup of coffee or hot chocolate and you peel back the little plastic lid and you take a drink and it tastes like Satan's brew because they somehow have managed to get the coffee and the hot chocolate to an absolute boil while everything else in the concession stand is freezing cold. But somehow they have the coffee and the hot chocolate hot enough that it will burn your mouth for ages. We're not talking about that. We're talking about 96% of Americans go to the pizzeria, they pick up the box, they open the lid, they see the steam that is rising off of the cheese, and they think to themselves, nah, it's worth it. They scoop in, they grab their slice, and they bite into it, in the process, scalding the roof of their mouth. For 3 days, can't feel anything, and then for the next 4 days of the week, feel like you have nailed a piece of sandpaper to the roof of your mouth, and you think to yourself, not still worth it. I would rather do that than take the slice of pizza out of the box and put it on the plate and let it cool down for 5 minutes. And I just want you to know you're not alone in that. This is the choice that 96% of Americans knowingly make. They knowingly make this choice. More than 50% of people hang up after being on hold 1 minute or less. Now, I would question how accurate this is, because anybody knows if you ask somebody under 40 years old to make a phone call, they look at you like you've just asked them to murder their mother. Like there is nothing they would want to do less than actually have to pick up a phone and call somebody that they don't know. If they haven't been texting somebody for 6 months, the idea of a phone call to them is a foreign concept that they hate to their core. But if you actually get somebody on the phone, more than 50% of people hang up after they have been on hold for 1 minute or less. And you think corporations don't know this? Why do you think anytime you're placed on hold, it's that horrible jazz song that every corporation has? And because they know, hey, half of you are going to hang up. All we got to do is keep you on hold for a minute or less. That's how every time you call in, we have unusually high call volume today. No, we know your product isn't any good, but the call volume isn't that much higher. You just know that people are going to hang up. Or this, 71% of people 71% of people exceed the speed limit every time they drive. You all are a bunch of sinners. 71% of people every single time they drive exceed the speed limit. Now, why do I say this? There are a lot of studies. Why did I pick these three? Because we just talked about the fact it's easy to look out a window, but sometimes you have to look in the mirror. And the reason I picked these three is because I'm guilty of all of them. I'm guilty of getting the pizza and thinking, it's worth it. And sometimes I don't regret it. I really don't. As soon as I hear the opening notes to that jazz song, I slam down the receiver if I'm on the office phone. You know, you can't hang up on somebody on a cell phone. Like when I was growing up, the phone was heavy, and if you slam it down, it conveyed something, you know. But as soon as you're on hold and you don't want to be, you slam down the phone. Or, okay, yeah, I occasionally drive a little fast, and I know some of you do as well. Those of you who are judging me, I'm not going to call out any names, but I've seen you as the Kewaunee County Sheriff loves to sit right down there at the end of the road picking off people as they leave church. Like, Sheriff Josky, seriously, could we not move the car down the road a half mile, please, and stop harassing the good people of Lakeside? Thank you for what you do to protect our community, but move the stinking cars down the road. And by the way, if you ever get pulled over there because you kind of rolled through the stop sign instead of stopped, and it's the Algoma police, it's outside their jurisdiction. So take them to court, all right? Take them to court, challenge it, and even if we don't win, we'll just annoy them enough to maybe do something and let us know. We'll all show up and have a good day in court out of it, all right? So I'm totally getting a ticket this week. No question about that. Patience can be challenging. Patience can be challenging in our everyday life, in our circumstances, in our situations. But I would say there's an area where it gets even more dangerous. And that's with people. Patience is hard in circumstances and situations, but patience can be even more challenging when it comes to dealing with people. So we look at 1 Thessalonians 5:14 and what this offers us. And we urge you, brothers, admonish the idle, encourage the faint-hearted, help the weak, be patient with them all. So there are different categories of people who are mentioned here. And right off the bat, it says, rebuke the lazy. Rebuke the lazy. Laziness and godliness do not coexist. Rebuke the lazy. Admonish them. Don't just accept it. Rebuke them. God has called them to something more than that for their life and for their existence, to utilize the gifts and the talents and abilities that He has given them. Don't just settle for it. Rebuke them. Admonish the idle. Don't just live with it. But recognize that some people aren't lazy. Some people are just defeated. Some people reach a point in life where they're discouraged. They feel depressed. And what we're told there is you don't admonish those people. You don't rebuke them. You encourage them. You come alongside that person. You build them up. You don't respond in the same way as you do to someone who's lazy. And then there's another category of person. And that's the weak. You help the weak. No parent gets angry at their 5-year-old who can't carry down the stairs a 40-pound bag of water softener salt. And what we have to recognize is sometimes there are circumstances and situations in people's lives where they're just weak. And it's not an issue of us rebuking that person, and we can encourage them all day long. They don't have the ability to do it. And the call for us is to step in and to help that person. So yes, with the lazy, you rebuke the lazy. With the discouraged and the distressed and the depressed, you come alongside of them and encourage them. With the weak, you come alongside of them and you help them. But notice what we're told across all categories. Be patient with them all. Be patient with them all. And as dangerous as it is for us to move at a pace where we lack patience in the situations and the circumstances of our lives, it is even more dangerous for us to go through life where we lack patience for people. And contrary to what the message of our society presents, the fruit of the Spirit requires us to develop a patience with people. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such things there is no law. The next fruit of the Spirit is kindness. Kindness is the next fruit of the Spirit, and we all recognize our world is in desperate need of more kindness. We all recognize this. The question that we have to ask is how? How do we go about bringing and getting more kindness in the world? When we all recognize it's something that is desperately needed, how do we go about getting it? And I'm so glad you asked that question because I'm about to tell you. Luke chapter 6, verse 31. And as you wish that others would do to you, do so to them. Let me read this again. It's Jesus speaking in Luke 6, 31. And as you wish that others would do to you, do so to them. In our culture, there's a prevalent mindset. And that mindset is, I'm going to respond to people in the way they respond to me. I will treat someone the way that they treat me. If someone is nice to me, I'll be nice to them. Even if other people don't like them, as long as they're nice to me, that's the way that I'm going to be to them. And that's a prevalent mindset in our society. That if you are this way to me, I'll be this way to you. The reality is, and the requirement of Jesus is as people who love and follow him, we've been called to a different standard. We've been called not to respond to people in the way that they respond and act towards us. We've been called to a higher level, a higher standard. And the standard that we've been called to is not to treat people the way that they treat us, but we've been called to treat people the way that we desire to be treated. See, there's a difference. Because under the message of our society, if you're a jerk to me, I'm allowed to be a jerk back. But under the message of Jesus, if you're a jerk to me, I'm not allowed to be a jerk back. And that's not nearly as much fun. But that's what Jesus requires. That we would treat people not how we are treated, but in the way that we desire to be treated. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Because the thought process is, well, if I actually do this, and if I treat people not how they treat me, but if I treat people in the way that I ultimately want to be treated, people are going to take advantage of that. And in the process, they're going to take advantage of my kindness. And to that I say, you're right. That could happen. And I think it's one of those areas to draw on a situation that we've already started to think about this morning through experiences on the train. If you've ever been to an urban center, you've undoubtedly seen at some level someone who's either homeless or purporting to be homeless. Now, the reality is there are a number of people who go out and pretend to be homeless and prey on the generosity of other people. And it's all an act. There's also a reality that there are legitimate people who are homeless and who are hurting. There are also problems of substance abuse, of alcoholism. Which means when people are when people are encountered with these opportunities, they have to try to identify what circumstance and situation it is. And so some people decide, hey, I'm just not going to do anything in that situation. I'm going to instead support a shelter or a mission in the city, and that's how I will respond to it. Others say, I'm going to offer that person food. I'll never turn down a person who's hungry, but I'm not going to just hand them cash that might go to further along a drug problem or alcohol dependency. Others are of the mindset, hey, my obligation is to respond to the need that's presented to me. And then what that person does with my response, they're ultimately accountable for. And I'm not saying one of those three is right or wrong or any of those things. What I am highlighting is that if we live our lives and we base our decisions on the decisions of others, we fall short of the standard that God has called us to live. Does that mean you're wrong if you decide, I'm not going to give something to a homeless person because they might use that gift to enable a person? That doesn't mean that at all. Hear me very clearly. But if we walk through life with the mindset of how you respond, how you react, dictates what I do. We fall short of what Jesus has called us to do and how we live our lives day in and day out. Your reaction and your response does not get to dictate my behavior. I wish it did. But the standard of Jesus is that I treat people and I do to people as I desire to be treated, not how they have treated me. And yes, some people will take advantage of this, but they're ultimately accountable for that. Everyone is a fan of grace when they need to be a recipient of it. We love the concept of grace when we have wronged somebody. But the concept of grace is a lot more difficult when we have to issue it, when we have been wronged. Jesus says, treat other people not as they have done to you, but as you wish they would do to you. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such things there is no law. The next fruit of the Spirit is goodness. Do good. Don't live a conflicted life. If you follow Jesus, actually follow Jesus. Don't just say and don't just claim to follow Jesus. Actually put it into practice in your life, with your conduct, with the choices that you make. Matthew 12:33-35 says this, either make the tree good and its fruit good, or make the tree bad and its fruit bad. For the tree is known by its fruit. You brood of vipers, how can you speak good when you are evil? For out of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaks. The good person out of his good treasure brings forth good, and the evil person out of his evil treasure brings forth evil. Which means if you're going to claim to follow Jesus, actually follow Jesus with your life. It does you no good to claim to follow Jesus and then continue to live like hell. That does not honor God. God doesn't desire that. What God desires is that if you claim to follow Jesus, you will actually follow Jesus in the way you live your life. When you stand before God one day, and we all will, He isn't going to look at your life and think, well, this does not look good. But you made a social media status update about me once that said you love Jesus. So, all right. What we produce reveals what's real. What we produce with our lives reveals what is real. So I have a question, and my question is this. What does your conduct say about you? What does your conduct say about you? What do your motives say about you? Are you producing good? Are you honoring God with the way you live your life? But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such things there is no law. As the train sat there and I stared out the window, I wondered if we were ever going to move. And before the train moved, I watched a stranger approach the man. who just moments before was threatening to kill another person over a seat on a train and a glance that somebody thought lingered for a second too long. That was trading insults over how much money they had and ready to kill someone over this. And I watched as a stranger who had no knowledge whatsoever of what had transpired on the train just moments before approached the participant. And I watched as that stranger asked the participant a question about getting around in the city. And I watched as the stranger who just moments, or I watched as the participant who just moments before was ready to kill someone, talk this stranger through and guide them on where they needed to go. And I thought it was a perfect example of the duality of the nature within us all. That in the midst of so much anger and rage and hopelessness of searching frantically for a Narcan pen because you recognize this could be the difference of whether or not you see tomorrow, and whatever happens in your life to take you to that point, and the frustration of threatening to kill somebody, to the kindness of walking a stranger who was confused to where they needed to go. Now that's out the window. What about in the mirror? I'm willing to bet it's been a really long time for most of us since we've threatened to murder somebody over a seat on a train. Or because somebody looked at us for a second too long. But what are the things that steal our love and our joy and our peace? What are the situations that set us off? Because there's a lack of patience. And the people that we want to treat in the way that they have treated us, instead of the way that we desire to be treated. And the good that we know that God is calling us to do, but we don't want to do. And the call for all of us who love and follow Jesus is that today and every day there would be more love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control in our lives than there was the day before. God help us. Be patient. Not just in the situations and circumstances that we face, but especially with the people. God, I pray you'd help us, that we would admonish the lazy, that we would encourage the discouraged, we would help the weak. God, I pray that we would be people who respond to others not in the way they treat us, but in the way that we desire to be treated. Help us, God. Die to the parts of ourselves that want revenge. And Lord, I pray that following you would be more than words, but it would be the reality of our lives every single day. So God, change us. Make us more like you. Change our natures. Help us. Increase in our lives for your glory, Jesus. It's in your name we pray. Amen.